There's a version of Tony Robbins that you see on Instagram, and then there's the version that I worked with for 8 years or so as his head trainer. The second Tony is the one that very few people ever get to see, and he's the reason that I made millions of dollars. All right, let me take you back to the beginning of this story. So here I am, I'm in Chicago. It's a random city for me. I had no money, no savings, no job, no nothing. I end up in this position where I'm homeless. I'm living in the back of my car. I'm sleeping on the floor of a karate school. I mean, I wasn't destitute living on a park bench, but I was sleeping in the back of my car every night. I was sleeping on the floor of a karate school when I had the opportunity to. But for me, I kind of spiraled out of control, and I was depressed and sad and frustrated and pissed off and angry, like maybe a lot of people in this world. But for me, I was just so desperate for answers. I was so desperate to try to make something of myself that I was willing to pay those dues. And, and being a little older, wiser, more mature, I realized I probably didn't have to go through all those struggles. I could have learned from other people, but I didn't know that at the time. So for me, if you can imagine, I'm sleeping in the back of my car. It's February in Chicago. It's 30 below zero. I can't sleep. It's too damn cold. So I go over to the Barnes & Noble, a little bookstore across the street, and I'm walking through the aisles just to stay warm, just to have something to do. And I see a little book on the shelf called Awaken the Giant Within by Tony Robbins. And I had seen the infomercials back in the day, Change Your Life, Tony Robbins. And I had been up late at night watching those and all this good stuff. But it never really occurred to me to go buy a book because I hated school. I hated education. I hated this. Come to find out, I love learning. I love education. I hated the school system, which I think is a complete joke, which has failed me, failed everybody else. But notwithstanding here, I see this little book on the shelf, Awaken the Giant Within. It's $20. And take a wild guess how much money I had in my pocket that night. $20. Divine intervention, universe talking to me, whatever you want to call it. But I bought that book. And for me, it was a wild decision because that was last of my food money. I didn't eat for like 2 weeks. I mean, I was going to the dollar menu every single day just to get my one double cheeseburger from that dollar menu just to survive and try to find something to do, right? But I bought that book, and I remember I'm sitting in one of the parking lots of a mall not too far from there, and I've got a bunch of jackets as my blankets in the back of my car, and I'm just sitting there in the parking lot and I'm reading this book. And if you ever had the chance to read it, Tony's describing the first couple of paragraphs. He's like, I'm flying my jet helicopter from my castle in Del Mar, California to my sold out seminar in Los Angeles. And I'm sitting here thinking, first thought in my head was, man, this braggadocious dude, I've made a huge mistake. I got to try to get this book refunded. I got to try to get my money back. I don't know. But for whatever reason, I just kept reading because I didn't have anything better to do. And he said, I stopped my helicopter because I recognized a building. And that building is a building that I had worked at as a janitor just 10 years ago. And I remember him saying, like, man, in those days, I was wondering where I was going to get my next meal. And I'm sitting in the back of my car like, man, I don't know where I'm going to get my next meal. And then he said, I was living in my car. And I'm like, dude, I'm living in my car. And he said, man, I was just depressed and frustrated and angry and upset at the world. And I'm like, I'm depressed and angry and frustrated and upset at the world. I'm like, and it was just an instant connection. There were so many weird parallels to his story and mine in that moment. So it caught my attention. And what Tony said in the book, he said, listen, everyone overestimates what they can do in a year. I'm going to be a millionaire this year. I'm going to be a billionaire this year. But they dramatically underestimate what they can do in a decade. And he said, listen, if you just stick with me, if you learn these lessons, these skills that I have to show you in psychology and mindset and emotions and the strategies that I have for you here, I promise you, your life is going to look a little different the next year, but in the next decade, it'll be unrecognizable. Because he says in your moments of decision, your destiny is shaped. And now you can't change your destination overnight, but you can sure as hell change your direction. And if you make a new decision right here, right now, you can decide to go down one path versus the other. And for me, I decided to keep going down that path. I'm like, you know what, Tony, I'm bought in. I got it. If you can just, I remember, in all the movies, they're shouting out to God, like, God save me. And I'm like, Tony Robbins, save me. So I remember reading that book, and I won't bore you with the whole story, but I moved back to Minnesota, where I'm originally from, and I ended up opening up a karate school. And it ended up being one of the biggest karate schools in the country at one point. We had, 3-4 other competitors around the country. I was really competitive, so I wanted to build the biggest, baddest school. We had over 1,000 students at one small point in time, and I was very proud of that. But as time went on, we built that. It was a very large business. I sold that, moved overseas, and I traveled about 65 countries, lived in 7. I started 2 more businesses, sold those, and it probably all sounds like I'm sitting here banging on my chest and telling you how great I am, but I'm telling you this because it's the same lesson that I learned from Tony, is that if you just make a new decision, in the next year, it might not look like much, but if you take it out 10 years, life looks dramatically different. Now it's been almost 20 years for me, and life has been pretty unique. So I want to just share with you here today some of the lessons that I've learned over the years and some of the lessons that I read in that book originally that didn't make sense until later on in my journey. So I figured I'd just start sharing these with you. So first and foremost, if your goal is to make millions of dollars, you can do it. Everyone can do it. And the biggest mindset shift that I had to make here, an amazing amount of abundance in the world. And for you to make more, earn more, doesn't mean you're taking away from other people. And this is an old story in The Richest Man in Babylon. And the reason I bring up all these different books is because Tony told me, he's like, I used to read a book a day and I'd try to get through everything. And I was like, that's what I'm going to do. So I read over 2,000 books. I went to over 200 seminars. I bought every stinking course on audio tapes. Actually cassette tapes and CDs and audio programs. And it wasn't until way later did they come out in MP3s and everything. But I remember The Richest Man in Babylon, he said, you know what, if someone buys a plot of land and they build a palace on it, they build a mansion on it, is the land not worth more now that that home is there? Of course. Is the land adjacent to it now worth more because it's there? If it's beautiful and it's really good, of course. So wealth grows in exponential ways. And a lot of people look at this and they say, well, if I make more money, that means I'm taking from somebody else. It's just not true. So we got to start with this mentality of abundance. But abundance can only be created in your own business. And this is going to be my own philosophy here that I'll share with you. And Tony was very much influenced by Jim Rohn. And Jim Rohn used to say this all the time. He would say, listen, profits are better than wages, which means that you can make a living if you have a job, but you can make a fortune if you own a business. It just means that you can do more for more people. And the thing that's so fascinating about being an entrepreneur, being a business owner then instead of being just an employee, and not to denigrate any employees, listen, there's a lot of people out there who, they don't want the stress, they don't want the challenge, they don't want the responsibility, they don't want to deal with all this. I mean, there's payroll and there's taxes and there's all these things that you're going to deal with as a business owner. I understand that. But if your goal is to make millions, there are very few employees who have ever done that in their entire lives. So first and foremost, the lesson is you got to have a business. You got to be able to provide a product or service to somebody somewhere out there. And then there's only a couple ways that you can do that. So in your mind, if you're looking to make millions, the same lesson that Tony taught me, he said, find something valuable as a product or service and deliver it. And the first thing he said is, listen, you got to provide more value than anyone else in the marketplace. So lesson number one is, you need a business, but lesson number two is your goal is not just to try to sell the cheapest crap. Your goal is not to just provide the most basic mediocre service. Your goal is to provide more value than anyone else would ever expect. So when someone comes to buy your product, your service from your business, you start to feel like, man, not only can you be proud of it, but every single person, they get all excited. And Tony taught me, listen, you got to create raving fans. You can't just have satisfied customers because satisfied customers go away. They'll always leave, especially when the market gets tight, especially when the economy gets tight, especially when the world challenges are at an all-time high. Satisfied customers will always find a new trusted supplier. And that's what we want to be to our customers, to our clients, is a trusted supplier. And how do we do that? We got to provide more value than anybody else. Well, one thing that I noticed in the karate school back in the day is we had another karate school down the street from me, and it's a long story, but he ended up shutting down while we were exponentially growing like crazy. And the reason wasn't because he was a bad instructor. He had a great school. He was a great instructor. He was a great guy. And one of the things that I noticed in the martial arts world is we weren't competing against other martial artists. There was nobody who went from his school over to my school. So nobody joins karate or martial arts or taekwondo and says, I need to go to a different school. No, they either do it or they don't do it. So for me, I realized very quickly is my biggest competition in the martial arts world was soccer and football and dance and gymnastics and every other activity that kids can do instead of martial arts. And for me, I knew that if I got the kids enrolled, I would get the parents because they were already there. They wanted to get in shape. They loved the exercise. They loved the family activity. So I just had to market to the children. But how did I do that? How did I provide more value? It wasn't that I taught better kicks and punches. I did. It wasn't that I taught better martial arts. I did. But it was because I added personal development, personal growth inside of everything. So for the kids to grow inside of the martial arts world, it wasn't just go from your white belt to your gold belt and you learn a couple of kicks and punches. No, we integrated with the schools and we said, hey, listen, your teacher has to sign off on your graduation to your next belt. If you're not doing well in school, you're not going to do well here. Hey, by the way, I need to see your report card. By the way, I need to see you this. And we would attach all of this personal development to our martial arts world. And what do you think that did for the parents? They were super excited. Every kid, every single kid that came into that karate school had ADD, ADHD. They were misdiagnosed, mislabeled, whatever. And they came in and all of a sudden their grades went from D's to A's. All of a sudden they went from being the shy kid to the confident kid. All of a sudden they had a better attitude. All of a sudden they had better grades. So the first lesson that I learned from Tony about providing more value was like, we've got to do more than just kicks and punches. We've got to be more to this community than just a place to go work out. So that was one of the biggest things. And we built that school, and I think the last year that we had it, we did something like 1.8 million or whatever it was. Now, of course, not all profit, right? When you get into business, you start to hear all these big revenue numbers. You're like, oh my God, this person's really rich. And you forget that they've got taxes and payroll and rent and all of these things, right? So with that being said, the second piece, the second lesson that I'll give you here is you just got to expect more out of yourself than anyone else ever would. And this is one of the things that Tony said was just, it hammered home, because I was raised in the martial arts, and I had martial arts instructors who would tell me that, like, hey, listen, I was so competitive, right? As a kid, if someone did 10 push-ups, I did 11. If someone worked out, I worked out twice. Like, I was just so competitive. I always wanted to be the best in the martial arts world. And then I took that attitude into Tony, and Tony said, hey, look, you got to expect more out of yourself than anyone else ever would. And for me, one of the biggest things, at one point, I was teaching 16 karate classes a day. 16. And for most people who are running martial arts schools out of their gym, they teach like 2 classes every couple of days or whatever it is. Or you look at the YMCA, it's teaching 1 martial arts class a week, whatever it is. And even schools that are struggling, dojos, karate schools, whatever, that are struggling, they just don't put in that time and effort and energy that I ever did. Not only did I teach 16 classes, but I would go to the 11 schools in my district, actual elementary schools, K through 8, and I would go teach your gym classes for a week. Hey, such and such school, how about I come in there and teach martial arts for your gym classes for the next week? And then I would do that in rotation, and I would go speak at the classrooms, and I would go to the business expos. So for me, it was all day, every day. I expected more out of myself than anyone else ever would, and that's why that thing grew. That's what was expected. So I was always prospecting. There was always lead generation. I was always building and growing and everything. So that lesson from Tony of just like expect more out of yourself than anyone else ever would. Everyone else thought I was crazy. Everyone else thought I was lying. Everyone else thought it was like, oh, that's too much for one human being to do. And I'm like, no, it's just not true. Look at Michael Jordan. Look at all these other sports superstars who just do more. And that's what I'm talking about here. So expect more out of yourself than anybody else ever would. Now, along those lines, one of the biggest things that Tony would say is that if you can't, you must. And if you must, you can. So many people say, hey, you can't do that. That's too hard. That's too much. It's too far. It's too difficult. Let's do this. I can't do it. And he would just, this mantra would always come up, whether it was the Personal Power cassette tapes or the Ultimate Edge audio program or like seeing him live. The biggest thing was, if you can't, you must. And if you must, you can. And in that moment, it was just one of these things. Is it a must or is it a should? Because a lot of people spend all day long, I should make more money. I should start a business someday. I should work out more. I should eat healthier. I should exercise more. I should say I love you more. I should. And most people spend their whole lives shooting all over themselves. But when it becomes a must, when finally you decide in that moment, you decide to cut off any other option, you say, listen, I've had it. I've had enough. I'm going to make this happen. I don't care what it takes. I must make this happen. And it's so funny, the resources that you find inside of yourself when something is a must instead of a should. When you have to work out, when you have to exercise, when you have to eat healthy, you just do it. When you have to show up to work, when you have to do these things, we just do these things. And for a lot of people, they start a business with a should. And the reason most businesses fail is because it's a should for them to succeed. And this might sound harsh, it might sound kind of mean, but the truth is the reason people fail, it's because it's a should, not a must. And for all of us, we have to make that distinction in our lives. Is it going to be should for you or is it a must for you? Now, here's one of the biggest challenges that I faced throughout my career. And maybe you have been a successful entrepreneur yourself. I don't know if I'd call myself successful. I've done pretty well. But over the years, one thing that I noticed is that there are no business problems. There are only personal problems that affect your business. And for a lot of people, they think that there's these business problems and payroll and this or that or whatever, but really it's your lack of the ability to make a decision because you're emotionally stressed, you're pissed off, you're frustrated, you can't control your thoughts, you can't control your discipline, you can't control yourself. And Tony would always say in the old Personal Power infomercial, he said, personal power, the definition is the ability to act, the ability to take action. That's what personal power power is. It's not about power over other people. It's about power over yourself. And so the biggest thing that I've realized over the years is when I was stressed, when I was pissed off, when I was frustrated, when I was in a down emotional state, that turned into poor decisions in business. That turned into poor financial decisions. That turned into things that cascaded into big problems. And I remember there were times where I would treat people harshly. I would treat myself even more harsh. I would not be focused or present when I needed to be, whether it was in relationships or business or negotiations or anything along those lines. And it was because I didn't deal with my personal problems first. And my challenge to you, if you're listening to this, wondering like, how the heck do I make this thing happen? How do I make my business go? How do I make millions of dollars? I guarantee you this might sound like fluff, but the number one thing that I can give to you here is that lesson is just there are no business problems. There are only personal problems that you bring into your business, because business is just math. Business has very little art to it. It's very scientific. You do XYZ formula, you get this result. And for a lot of people, you start to realize that business is actually kind of boring. There's only two things you can do, a product or a service. And there's only so many ways you can do that. There's only 3 ways you can sell things, one-to-one, one-to-many, or on display on a shelf, right? We call it a merchant. And there's only a few things that you need to do. There's only, 8 or 9 things people can see before they become a customer. And there's 8 or 9 things they can see after they become a customer. You can start to see why I got so good at marketing. It wasn't because I was such a genius with a capital J. It was simply because I started to understand the simplicity of marketing, the simplicity of business, and understanding that all of these things, I made it so complicated because I wasn't emotionally there. And the number one skill that I can give you, if Tony Robbins says this, I don't know if he says it very much these days, but it's emotional state management. That's the number one skill of all time, the ability to control and manage your emotions. More importantly, the ability to manage and control your decisions, because we all make the wrong decisions in a down emotional state. I mean, come on, let me ask you ever said something you really wish you could have taken back? You would have said something different in that moment if you're like, baby, I love you, instead of, I'm going to kill you right now. Like, you make a dramatically different decision, whether you're happy, positive, motivated, driven, passionate, hungry, whatever it is, versus when you're pissed off, angry, depressed, frustrated, upset. Am I making sense here? Because emotional state management is the one thing that will take you from 0 to millions. And again, I know it sounds like fluff. I know it sounds like this is a very woo-woo conversation, but I'm telling you, man, everything about making money is about the right decisions. And you can't make the right decisions in the wrong emotional state. Now, there's probably a million more things that I can share with you, because like I said, I spent 20 years, around Tony Robbins and reading everything that he put out and listening to every single thing. I listened to it so many damn times that I've memorized it. You probably even see in some of my language, like how I speak, I tend to speak like him at times, just because I've spent so much time obsessing over his content, his material. I mean, I've been to all of the seminars dozens of times, Unleash the Power Within, which was the main flagship seminar that me and my team sold. I've been to it now probably 60 times. The 4-day seminar I've been to 60 sometimes, maybe 70. I don't know what the real count is anymore. But I tell you this because there's a million things I could teach you, but one thing that's really valuable in business is what we like to call the third option. And the third option is, for a lot of times, you're going to get caught in this situation. Maybe you haven't been there yet. I'm sure you have. Maybe you just didn't recognize it. Is there always seems to be a black and white decision. And every time there's a binary choice, 1 or 0, yes or no, black or white, up or down, left or right. If that is your only 2 options, you're blind. And when you're blind, it means that you're missing option number 3 and 4 and 5 and 6. Right? And for a lot of times in business problems get solved with creative solutions. So your job in business, you're always going to run into problems. Here's what a business is. A business is only designed to solve problems for its clients, for its customers, for its internal operations, for its finances, for its capital, for all of these things about how do I make a better product? How do I have a better service? How do I charge more money? How do I make more profit? How do I do that? Whatever it is, it's all just problem after problem after problem after problem. And the best part about this, most people hate problems. But for you and I, as entrepreneurs, as business people, we enjoy problems because when we fix them, when we correct them, when we find something new and unique, a different way to solve this problem, we get paid more money. And life is pretty damn good when you solve other people's problems. I remember Zig Ziglar used to say it, if you can just help enough people get what they want, you'll have everything that you want. And that's really what the definition of a business is just helping people. And here's what I would suggest. My own personal philosophy is business is about service. service to our fellow mankind, service to our fellow people, service to our fellow community, city, state, country, world, whatever it is. And I don't think there's a greater calling than service to our fellow mankind. I'm not a religious person by any means, but I think we can all agree that one of the best things that you can do in this world is serve your fellow mankind. And that's what I really truly think a business is. And that's where the wealth comes from, not just monetarily, not just money, finance, but wealth in the personal sense, in the fulfillment sense, in the ability to, really make an impact and a difference on this world. So what I'm trying to get at here is you are going to be faced with a lot of problems. And those problems sometimes feel like they only have two options, two roads. And if you ever catch yourself in this moment, we can only do X or Y, you need to stop, reset yourself, and come up with 3 or 4 or 5 more solutions. You got to brainstorm different ideas. You got to figure out what else is out there. You got to talk to other people to see how they have solved that problem in the past. Because I promise you, if you feel like a rat in a maze that you can only go left or right, you're missing it. You're missing that you could just go up, right? You can dig down. You can do whatever you want. So you got to look for that third option. And I hope that's helpful to you. Maybe it doesn't make sense here today, but I promise you at some point in your future, it will make sense because that's one of the most beneficial things. Last thing I'll talk about here. And this is something that's going to be very fascinating for a lot of people. And again, whether it makes sense to you today or not, you have to find a way to become a trusted supplier. And this is a piece of language that Tony would always mention when he taught Business Mastery, he taught some of these other programs that was about entrepreneurship, that was about businesses. Your job is to try to become a trusted supplier of a product or service. And I always thought that was kind of a weird way to say it, and it didn't make a lot of sense to me. But as the years went on, it started to make more and more sense. It became more and more clear because here's where we are. It's 2026. We are in a massive trust deficit economy. What do I mean? There has never been a harder time in history to sell someone a product or service the first time because everybody's seen everything. Everybody's been scammed by everybody. Trust is at an all-time low because every product or service you buy doesn't meet our expectations. It definitely doesn't exceed it. Nobody goes above and beyond these days. Nobody tries to make your experience better. Nobody tries to make the product better. They can only try to find ways to cut costs and make the product worse. I mean, when's the last time you had McDonald's? That garbage has been horrible for 20 years, but it's even worse now. It's just straight up plastic garbage that they're feeding you, right? I haven't been there in a while, but man, you can't even look at it without just like gagging. Ugh. Maybe I'm saying this because I used to sustain myself on double cheeseburgers, right? But the reason I bring this up is because if trust is at an all-time low, like how are you ever going to succeed? There's no way. Everything is against you. Nobody's ever going to trust you. Everyone hates you. But listen to me now. There's something really fascinating about the world today is, there's never been a harder time to get someone to know, like, and trust you the first time, to get you to buy from you the first time. But there's never been an easier time to get someone to buy from you the second time, the third time, the fourth time, the fifth time. Because if you can cross that barrier of know, like, and trust, now you become what we call a trusted supplier. And instead of this customer or client looking for a new person to trust, they just want to go back to someone they already trust and say, hey, what would you buy here? How do I find this? Where do I get this product? Do you have that for sale? Do you have that for offering? In my own business right now, I make my living these days as a fractional CMO. So I work with a lot of very large companies and, I make them millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars a year. I'm very proud to say that one. But one of the things that's so fascinating in this world is they keep coming back to me because they trust me. They're like, hey, you built out this website and this funnel and you're running these ads for us. Can you do this? Can you do this? Can you do this? And originally I started my career back up when I retired from my role with Tony Robbins. I started marketing consulting. And at the beginning, people just wanted ads. They just wanted websites. They just wanted a strategy. They just wanted a consultation. But for all of those people who trusted me enough to give me money, time, effort, energy to go look into their business, the trust too, right? To go look in their business and see, hey, here's what you could do. Here, have you tried this strategy? Have you tried this tactic? Let's turn this around. And it worked, which almost always does, not to toot my own horn here, toot, but and when it worked, now all of a sudden they're like, hey, can you also do this? Hey, can you also do that? Hey, can you also do this? And that turned again from just like a one-man shop to now I've got a little agency where I've got several employees and team members and teammates. And my brother has joined me in my business now, so that's exciting. So we got a lot of really cool things, but that only happened because I became a trusted supplier. So how does this affect you? Well, listen to me. You got to find a way to become a trusted supplier in your market, in your product, in your service. And how do you do that? Well, it goes back to everything we talked about here today. Number one, you got to have emotional state management. You got to control and manage your emotions so that you can control and manage your decisions. Because when that pissed off, angry customer comes back with questions and they are a little snarky and they're a little rude and they're a little in your face, are you going to react to that or are you going to respond to that? Because most people would react, well, screw you, we don't need your business anyways. Other people are cool, calm, collected. They can respond and say, hey, listen, it's not as big of a deal. And you start to realize that in the moment they might be upset about something else, but you take care of them. Now they know, like, and trust you even more, and they do even more business with you. So emotional state management is a big piece of this. Next up, you got to provide more value than anyone else in the marketplace. If you're selling loaves of bread, it better be damn well good bread, right? Because there's a lot of competition in the bread world. So you need better bread. You need a better product. You need a better service. These days, you can't just get by with drop shipping crap from China. You have to go there and figure out what is going to make this product better. How do I improve upon this? How do I make this 10 times better than my competition? How do I improve upon this service to, here's what everybody's so upset about. Let's fix this problem so we can do a better product, a better service, provide more value. And then number three, you got to expect more out of yourself than anybody else ever would. And listen, a lot of people buy programs and courses and they take these coaching programs where people are telling them how to build a business. And there's nothing wrong with that. I've done it a million times. I love those courses. I still buy them today, but nobody can do it for you. Nobody's going to run to your house and knock on your door at 5 a.m. and say, hey, listen, we got to do prospecting today. Let's put together your list of prospects. Let's go figure out who do you need to door knock and cold call, and how do you need to email people? How do you call people? How do you ask for referrals? You got to expect more out of yourself than anyone else ever would. I've taught a coaching course over the last couple of months here, very small private group. And for these guys, one of the funniest things is the younger guys and the older guys and the middle-aged people here, men and women both, they all tend to struggle with this expectation of someone is going to give it to them. They struggle with this, I was an employee, now I'm a business owner, so I need somebody to tell me what to do. But the truth is, if you're going to survive and really thrive in business, you need to expect more out of yourself than anyone else ever would. That means if someone tells me to prospect 10 names, I'm going after 20. If someone tells me to do 100 of an activity, I do 200. Whatever it takes, I do it because I expect more out of myself. And I would never just go out there and pound on my chest and tell you, oh, I'm going to do double. No, I'm just going to quietly do it. So when that 100, someone comes around and says, hey, if you want to be successful, you need to reach out to 100 people. I'm going to reach out to 1,000. I don't care what it takes. I expect more out of myself than anyone else ever would. And that's different than this hustle culture. We're not hustling in place, burning ourselves out. We're being intelligent about it, but we are expecting more out of ourselves. Now, the last couple of ones, if you can't, you must, you can, right? And that's the bottom line of, there are going to be days you're burnt out. There are going to be days where you're tired and exhausted and you're going to say, I just can't go on. I can't do anymore. I can't make it happen. And the truth is you can. And if you can, you must. And if you must, you definitely can. Right? And then, of course, we talked about these other pieces. There are no business problems. There's only personal problems that affect your business. So you got to make sure your psychology, your mindset, your home life is right in order to do this business well. And then the last thing that we talked about was becoming a trusted supplier and having that third option. When you're really going through and trying to decide between black or white, up or down, you got to look at all the other things. I call myself a strategist because I want to look at the entire battlefield. I want to look at all of my options, and I don't want to just pretend it's forward or backwards, up or down, left or right. I want to know all of my options, and I want to pick the best one. So listen, I know this has been an intense video for you here today, but if your goal was to make millions of dollars, you want to learn some of the lessons I learned from Tony Robbins to be able to do this for myself, and now 4 different businesses. And for Tony Robbins, I was out there, I probably sold about $200 some million for Tony. And life has been pretty good for me because I made that original decision. And I guess now at the end of this video, it's your turn to make a decision. What are you going to do? Where are you going to go? Who are you going to be? Where are you going to go from here? And are you going to make the decision to start your own business or to grow it? Are you going to make your decision to push yourself to the next level, to be more emotionally resilient, to be more forthcoming, more energetic, more whatever it is you want to call it? What's the decision that you're going to make for yourself today? And I remember back in the old Personal Power cassette days, tape number 1, I still have it memorized, the Personal Power. Your first thing is make 2 decisions. What's one decision that's going to affect your life today? And what's one decision that's going to affect your life in the near future? So if you want, do yourself a favor and make 2 decisions right here, right now.